Hello and welcome to BWTV. Today I am joined by Ms. Manmeet Nanda, who is the Joint Secretary in the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. And today she is going to talk to us about a host of issues ranging from what the government is doing on the ease of doing business aspect, reducing cost of regulations, and the impact on supply chain resilience. Ms. Nanda, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. My first question to you, we've made some great strides on when it comes to the ease of business rankings in recent years, but when we go down to the industry, they say that it's really not felt. So what's more for the ministry when we talk about ease of doing business? How can we reduce the cost of doing business, as the industry says? What's the road ahead from here?
So thank you for having me here. Yes, India has been making a lot of strides, like you said, since the year 2014, when the reform agenda was set by the Honorable Prime Minister of this country. And at that time, it was completely unheard of that India in the next 4 to 5 years of the Doing Business report would ever score anywhere in being one of the highest performing nations in the world. And we were in the top bracket all those 5 years in terms of our improving our performance vis-a-vis our performance 1 year earlier. And that 79 JAM rank that we see today is because of the concerted efforts that the government put to the reform agenda. Taking that story forward, a lot of things have happened in the reform ecosystem. The government of India and the Department of Promotion for Industry and Internal Trade understood that merely doing the business reforms as mandated by the World Bank were not enough. So we created, and something again very unique, the Business Reform Action Plan that was rolled out from 2015 onwards. We are in fact in our 6th edition as we speak. Business Reform Action Plan took on to address the issues that you have just spoken about, simple reforms that were required for both big and large businesses, and small steps that the state governments and central ministries could take to improve the business ecosystems. Of course, as we speak today, the work has been done, but there is a lot that needs to do. And during our interactions with various stakeholders, the industry associations, we often hear about the requirement to reduce the cost of doing business. And I think our next agenda of the reform ecosystem is directed towards that. And we believe that that is the right step now.
So, as you mentioned, DPIT has now started, started a drive to reduce compliance burdens. So, if you could elaborate more as to why it is at this stage important to talk about reducing the cost of regulation.
So, the cost of regulation, as you've mentioned, is something that has been studied by many of the developing nations. And if India, and because of all the work that we've been doing and that 79 rank jump that you see in only one index, but we have actually improved our rank through various other indices. We have improved our equity market valuation also in the last 5 years, the number of startups that have started, the startup valuation system, the ecosystem of the startup has developed, the number of MSMEs in the countries have grown. So all this has also improved our other global indices. But what we realize that we want to get into the top notch and to actually get into the race of being a developed nation, we need to do what is being done everywhere, and that is measuring the cost of doing business or the cost of regulation, as we want to put it. And every regulation has a cost that comes with it, and it is very important for the government to take something that is down the path of optimal regulation. We need not over-regulate, but we need not under-regulate. We need to maintain and understand that there is a cost and benefit required for every regulation. It is important to ensure that the socio-economic factors need to be looked into, that regulation is important, we go ahead with that. And if it is not, we try to reduce the cost in the other processes by some kind of social or economic re-engineering of the processes, and that's where compliance reduction plays a very important role.
So the approach that you just shared, has it been adopted internationally somewhere else?
Yes, it has. I think about 100 countries are doing it, and all the developed nations that we know of, the UK, USA, Germany, Australia, New Zealand, they have all adopted it. Some small nations have also adopted it, and it's interesting to know and study those. We have been using this time to actually look into international regulations. Very interesting study that we came across was of Malaysia. So they try to discover what it is and what are the various compliances that are required for opening petrol pumps across different cities in Malaysia. Across different cities in Malaysia, the number of compliances required were different. The cost of opening that similar kind of petrol pump was different. This is what I mean, and this is what is a part of our systems also. We have different regulations for the same business entities across different state governments. There are different requirements. We need to study them. We need to understand if that same business can function with a lesser number of regulations, lesser number of NOCs, if we can move towards deemed approvals with longer time period between renewals. We are bringing out something which is optimal. And that's how Malaysia brought down a lot of costs. So if Malaysia can do it, why not India?
Right. So based on your consultations or ground level talks with the industry stakeholders, when we do this, what you just said, what are some of, probably if you could list some ground level challenges that the industry has pointed out that could really help them if we could implement this agenda?
So every business ecosystem, say for the medical device or the pharmaceutical device, is behest with a number of requirements that are presented to them by different ministries or regulators. Very interestingly, while we were talking to the pharma industry, we understood that now for any industry to come into place, you need clearances for the building. You need NOCs, you need pollution clearances, you need a fire clearance. Now in the pharma industry, they were forced to also install sprinklers there. Right. Now for the product that they make, a sprinkler, if it gets turned on, it'll create humidity in the entire factory place. It will spoil the entire products that they are making. But they had to put a fire sprinkling system because that was a requirement of the NOC. Then they had to maintain that entire fire equipment system because every year the NOC has to be renewed. So they maintain a fire system which they don't use. But because of the product that that industry deals with, they also have to install other fire equipment handling systems which are CO2 based, which do not spoil their products, but because that is not an acceptable part of the NOC regulation, they need to employ and deploy two systems, maintain two systems, and annually get that inspection done. Excessive costs. And this is just one example. It's again government departments working in silos or government departments having a very straight-jacketed approach. Not saying that there is anything wrong in it, but we need to interact more with our stakeholders, understand what behests that industry and mold those requirements. The moment we start doing that, the cost will come down.
Another connected question or aspect to this is now that we are moving towards sustainable supply chains, and given how the supply chains have revamped sort of after COVID pandemic, I want to understand this impact of reducing cost of regulations to have resilient supply chains.
Major role again, because everything eventually, for us to be a leader and for the fact that we are rolling out so many PLI production link incentive schemes, we are wanting to attract the global best into our country. So we need to make sure that our manufacturing ecosystem is as inviting, because we need them to come here, set our base here, and then we will be the exporters and the supply chain globally. For that, we have to not only ensure that these schemes are in place, but we also need to ensure that they come in a smooth and easy manner, and that is why we have rolled out the national single window, where it is a one-stop solution where they do come in to set up investment into the country. They know all their clearances and approvals that are required through that national single window, and it is through that they will apply not only to central ministries but also to state governments. So we are trying to create the entire environment which is attractive enough for them to come in. We have made changes in the corporate law, the tax, the corporate law has, Companies Act has amended. We are in our process of making amendments in the LLPs. Our FDI regime has over the years continuously becoming more and more encouraging, and we've opened a lot more sectors. In the recent year, we've opened so many, like insurance, like petroleum and natural gas. We are looking into working with other in sectors also. It's all because we know that we have the skill set, we have the population with the skill set, the youth population is on our hand, and that we do have the reform ecosystem in place or getting there, and that we will be a very important player in the global value supply chain.
Ms. Nanda, my last question to you. In one or two lines, if you have to sum up all of the initiatives that have been happening under you at DPIIT and its contribution towards government's agenda of Atmanirbhar Bharat and Viksit Bharat, in one or two lines.
I think the vision of Viksit Bharat of 2047 is to see India as a very important role in the global value supply chain, and everything else, including Atmanirbharta, which is basically vocal for local and for manufacturing locally but globally. That completely sums up the entire essence of the Government of India and the work that department does for this. And I think these small changes and steps that we are taking towards either cost of regulation, measuring the cost of doing business, the regulatory compliance burden reduction exercise, rationalizing, simplifying, digitizing things, creating the national single window are all towards this.
Ms. Nanda, thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so
much. That's it on this edition of BW Dialogue. Thank you.